Today on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast, we're going to talk all about Marvel's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And we'll get to all of that right after this. A new year is just around the corner, and I can't believe it. And it's time for me to review my goals from this year and to start setting goals for next year. If you're wanting to learn more about how to set realistic goals and make a plan to achieve them, check out the Goal Process 101 ebook. I lay out a simple, easy to understand and implement process for you, helping you celebrate what you've already accomplished and taking the steps needed to accomplish your goals next year. Download your copy at goalprocess101.com. And now, back to the show. Marvel's Shang-Chi that just came out on Disney Plus has a pretty strong family motif running throughout it. Real family as well as some found family. So I want to start with some scripture about family. Let's start with Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And Ephesians 6:1-4. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And last, 2 Corinthians 6:18. I will be a father to you, and you will be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. We are in the holiday season. We just had Thanksgiving. If you're listening to this pretty close to launch day, this is a time when lots of families get together and celebrate. For many, these are exciting times to enjoy old stories and make new memories. But for some, this is a hard time because of loss of family members recently or over the years. For others, it brings back painful memories. Some of fathers that were not really what they should have been here on earth. No matter where you are on that list, I want to remind you of this. As Christians, God is our heavenly Father. But unlike our earthly fathers, God is perfectly loving and perfectly just. Regardless of our past experiences, God is present and loves us even at times when it doesn't feel that way. I pray that you can find some comfort in this, no matter where your situation finds you. During this holiday season, I pray that you will feel the presence of God surrounding you. Well, let's get to my review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, there will be some spoilers, and I'll let you know when we get there. So be aware. But at the end of the show, go ahead, even if you don't want to be spoiled, if you haven't watched it yet. I mean, it's been in theaters for a couple of months, and it's been on Disney Plus for a couple of weeks, so I don't feel too bad about the spoilery content. But definitely, even if you don't want to spoil the film, go ahead and skip to the end. I do have a couple of quick announcements I want to give you. Let's start with my basic thoughts. First off, I thought this was a really good movie. This was an enjoyable film, a solid Marvel movie. Now, that being said, it's not one of the best Marvel movies so far, but by far, it is not the worst. Now, Rotten Tomatoes shows it has a very high rating with critics and viewers alike. A couple of things also lead to this making sense, those numbers actually being real, is we've got some solid box office returns domestically and globally, even continuing week after week. And this is a movie that's stayed in most theaters over a month, which a lot of movies have not been doing lately. They've only been in the majority of theaters for 2 or 3 weeks and then dropping off significantly. Shang-Chi had some staying power with it. For those who missed it in theaters, it is available on Disney Plus now. And there is a great behind the scenes feature. It's about a little over an hour long. It's well worth watching if you enjoy the process of making movies, getting that behind the scenes look. It really is a great little feature. Definitely worth watching. The movie had a large break during the production time, which makes it a little bit odd. But that happened because of COVID. So the movie had already started shooting. Then they had this large break, and then they were able to start shooting again, primarily because a lot of their shooting was happening in Australia. And Australia had fewer cases of COVID, and they were able to get back up and running production wise quicker than some other locations. Now, some films really suffered because of these breaks. Either major delays of finishing the films, or even just the film not feeling like it was completely finished properly because of these breaks. I don't think Shang-Chi suffered too much from this COVID break. The production looks solid. The writing is solid. The final product just is a nice little Marvel movie. And I think it was done really, really well. This is for sure back to the Marvel action comedy movie, like many of the other Marvel films. So think the Thor series, or the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of films. This is a fun little movie. If you are looking for high art and drama, I mean, there's some drama, but if you're looking for a high art film, this is not it. Okay, this is the quintessential Marvel fun action funny movie. So be aware when you get into it. Now, get ready to read some captions if you don't speak Mandarin like me. So if you are the kind of person who really doesn't like reading the text on the screen, they do speak Mandarin quite a bit throughout the film, but they do put the subtitles on the screen. Just be aware. It's a thing. I'm not fond of reading movies, but for a movie like this, it makes sense. Something else to talk about is the movie soundtrack, the musical track, if you will. It's a little different if you are, into orchestral and, film score kind of music. This one's a little different. This is a little more like Guardians of the Galaxy in that there's a lot of pop music kind of things, except rather than nostalgia like Guardians of the Galaxy, we really get some current pop rap kind of tones throughout the film. A lot of popular songs being played, and honestly, really good quality stuff. If you are into that kind of thing, this is going to be a great soundtrack for you. If you're into John Williams orchestral scores, this is not the soundtrack for you. But I did really enjoy the music for this film. I thought they chose some great tunes, and they just kind of fit the feel of the film, in that it was a more modern take on the martial arts style. Now, something that I talk about in almost every superhero movie is CGI. And I am a bit of a CGI snob when it comes to things like this. I'm somewhat disappointed. The CGI was somewhat inconsistent. What I mean by that is some of the CGI was amazing. In fact, there are some shots that I would never have guessed were CGI until I watched the behind the scenes. and watching the behind the scenes and realizing that certain things literally did not exist at all. Some of it is stunningly uh, accurate and immersive, and it just feels real. But then there are a couple of shots that just really took me out of the film because the CGI just really wasn't there. And probably the biggest scene for this, now this is a little bit of a spoiler. There is a scene where one of the characters, his vehicle is going to go off a cliff, and he's the only one that's able to jump to safety. Um, it just looks bad. It's poor CGI. Um, for movie's sake, I think it would have been better to cut the scene. But it is what it is. And there are a couple other shots that have that same odd feel to them, but the majority of the CGI is really, really good. It disappoints me that there was some inconsistency. You know, 2 or 3 more days on that shot could have made it not feel like it stood out like it did. I mentioned earlier there was a little feature that, like an hour-long little feature that you can watch behind the scenes. It is Marvel Assembled Episode 6 if you're on Disney Plus. Really worth watching. The bus rig is absolutely amazing. It is one of the coolest film rigs I have ever seen. How they did it and how they shot it, it's worth watching just for the bus rig. I promise you, you will not believe some of the things they had done. So here is your spoiler warning. I'm going to get into spoiler territory now. Most of you know that this is the origin story for the MCU version of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, as he's called in the comic books. And we're going to see a slightly different Shang-Chi, but not significantly so, I don't think. I am probably going to butcher most of these names, and I'm going to apologize up front, but I'm going to try my best. We have actor Simu Liu, who plays Shang or Shang-Chi. And he's a relatively unknown film actor. He's mostly been on TV, and he is, Asian American. And but this is his first feature film lead role, and in fact, I think this may be his first feature film role with a character that has an actual name. He has a couple of credits on IMDb in films, but they're like, Man with a Broom or something like that. They're very minor things, but his TV credentials are he's got some fairly substantial TV credentials. But he really does fantastic in this role. He does many of his own stunts in this role, and he already had some martial arts background, so that was really fitting. He does a great job. Then we have Tony Leung. Tony Leung plays Wenwu, who is the actual Mandarin. So if you've been following Marvel Cinematic Universe for any time at all, back in Iron Man 3, we met the Mandarin, but then we found out it wasn't the Mandarin. There was somebody else behind him. And so now we are finally getting an actual Mandarin as far as the Marvel comics go. And I'll get into that here in a little bit as to how he's different. Tony Leung is a famous actor in Hong Kong and Asian films. He is probably one of the best, if not the best known Asian film star in that part of the world. And he does a phenomenal job as Wenwu. Then we have an actress that I was not quite sure about, Awkwafina. Awkwafina plays Katie. Now, Awkwafina is well known for her comic roles, so I wasn't sure how she was going to fit in, but her character does a really great job. Awkwafina does a great job in the film, and she's kind of a Darcy kind of character. So if you look at the Thor movies, or some of the other things that the Darcy character has been in, that's kind of Aquafina's job in this film. This is not a comic book character. She didn't exist before, so this is a MCU only role. So how they play her out is going to be interesting. They could really go anywhere with this character. Um, the character is definitely there to give and get exposition. That is Katie's job in the film, and she does a really great job. So she's the character who says, "What just happened?" or "What is that?" or "Explain this to me." And then they get to, exposit to her exactly what's going on and explain whatever the situation is. That's her job. She does a really good job of it. And she is definitely the comic relief of the film. Then one of my favorite actors ever, Ben Kingsley, is in this film. He plays, once again, reprising his role as Trevor Slattery, who was the Mandarin of Iron Man 3, who was not really a Mandarin. He was really an actor that was hired to play the role of the Mandarin. Ben Kingsley is absolutely one of my favorite actors. This is a crazy, crazy role for him, but he does a really good job. It kind of gives his character a completion of his story arc. But he's super weird. This may be the weirdest Trevor Slattery that we have seen so far. Then we have Munger Zhang, who plays Xiling. Xiling in the MCU is kind of a composite character. In the comics, Shang-Chi had 5 sisters, I believe it is. And Xiling is a combination of at least a couple, maybe all of his sisters put together. This is a Chinese stage actor. This is kind of her Hollywood debut. She has not done a lot of film work. One of the notes I read was she actually got acting coaching from Ben Kingsley, coaching her how to turn her stage presence, her stage acting, into the film acting idea, because they're so different. But she does an amazing job of playing Xiling, and my understanding is she didn't really have much of a martial arts background, so she learned most of that work for this film. Now, the backstory here, this is what we want to talk about. This is kind of the key to seeing how this film works. Now, as far as the backstory goes for Shang-Chi, that's where things get a little interesting. It's similar, but it's a little bit different than what we find in the comics. So let's kind of go through some of it. Some of the similarities. He has a father who trains him as an assassin. But his father is, the head of a crime syndicate. And so, these are all some of the similarities. The big difference is the MCU has decided to make his father the Mandarin, or Wen Wu. So that changes things a little bit, so that this character that is, a known character is now the father of Shang-Chi, which was not a thing in the comics. For the MCU, I think this change makes sense. We've been trying to establish this character for a long time, this character of the Mandarin, and we've kind of failed. The MCU has failed us multiple times now. The idea that that's who this is, I think it gives Shang-Chi a better motivation in general, and it fits really well within the scope of the MCU. In the comics, he really doesn't have superpowers as such. He's just super physically fit, to the point that he can control his body to do what seems like some superhuman feats, when he's really just a peak specimen beyond anything that we can, imagine in reality. Now, in the MCU, it's kind of similar. He doesn't really have superpowers, but he is so trained in these special martial arts that some things appear to be superpowers. Now let's look at the Mandarin, or Wenwu. Now, in the comics, he is descended from Genghis Khan and was probably born in the 1940s, because the Mandarin actually came out in the comic books in the 1960s, even though Shang-Chi happened in the 1970s. These two characters generally wouldn't have fought as such in the comics. The Mandarin was generally an Iron Man enemy. So that's where we have another kind of a big difference here. But in the comics, as I said, he's probably born in the 40s. In the MCU, it is implied that he's not just descended from Genghis Khan, he probably was Genghis Khan, that he's at least 1,000 years old. And the rings are significantly different. In the comics, he actually has 10 physical rings, one on each finger, and they are all from, things that were scavenged from an alien spacecraft. And each individual ring has a separate power, and so it gives him all sorts of cool superpowers that way. Now, in this version of Wenwu, of the Mandarin, we have 10, which are basically bracelets. We're going to call them the rings, 5 on each arm. And they give him some super strength. He's able to control them in certain ways to make them kind of like a whip at times, or, kind of a repulsor ray kind of a setup that he has sometimes. It allows him to propulse himself, to fly temporarily, or to land more gracefully when he's falling. So they're definitely, the plot armor of the MCU right now for this character. They can do basically whatever they need to do at this very moment. I have been disappointed that we never had a real Mandarin. I was a bit disappointed that the 10 rings weren't physical rings, that each one didn't have its own special power. After watching the movie, I get it. I see why they did what they did. It is a lot more straightforward. It's a lot easier for the audience to understand. The traditional 10 rings from the comic books might have been just a little overboard. And with Thanos recently, he had the 6 Infinity Stones, and each of the Infinity Stones gave him different powers. It feels a whole lot like the 10 rings, and so I can see why they changed that. So I'm going to let that slide. I'm not going to complain about that anymore. Now, one thing that does kind of stand out in this film, and this may be an issue that some people have had, and I've read reviews from the critics, and I've read reviews from individuals, and it does seem to be polarizing. People either really like this movie or really don't like this movie. But one of the things is that there are lots of flashbacks. They use the flashbacks in place of a lot of backstory dialogue, or in place of exposition dialogue, to tell stories that have already happened so that they can catch you up, and so that other things that are going to happen make more sense. I don't think that's bad, but as a general rule, the flashback kind of idea tends to work better in written stories than it does in movies. I think these work well. They're acceptable, partly because some of them are so spectacular looking. Some of the best CGI happens in these flashbacks. Some of the best fight choreography happens in these flashbacks. Some of the best cinematography happens during these flashbacks. So they're definitely worth the price of putting them in. Another thing I've heard some people say is they're tired of the sympathetic villain. Now, the idea of a sympathetic villain is that the audience feels for the villain in such a way that, is he really a bad guy? He's not really a bad guy. He's just slightly misguided, or he, you know, he's got a real belief that actually kind of makes some sense. Now, I don't feel that in this movie. Some people say they felt it, but I don't. Here's what I think we have. I think we have a truly motivated villain. He has a real motivation that makes sense. But as a general rule, the audience, I don't think, is going to buy into that this is a sympathetic reason. It's more of an irrational reason, but it makes sense to him. And that's the kind of villain I like. I like a villain who is motivated, who is a bit irrational in why they're motivated or what they're motivated by, so that we don't have that sympathy. We don't feel for the villain, but we can clearly see, okay, here's why they do what they do. That's totally ridiculous, but in their brain, in the villain's brain, it makes sense. And, in this movie, we have, he's been a gangster kind of all of his existence. If he was Genghis Khan, he was a conqueror. So he's all these things over the years. Now, we also have the loss of his wife, which is traumatic. And then we have this irrational belief that he can save his wife. And that's all good motivation for the character. It makes sense. It pushes the film along. It is the purpose of the movie itself. But at the same time, I don't feel sympathy there for the villain. I just feel the idea of, okay, that makes sense why he wants to do this. It's irrational. He shouldn't want to do this, but it makes sense and does give him a motivation. I like that. This is definitely a martial arts film built into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as I said earlier. And we see two distinctly different fighting styles, which is kind of fun. We have a more aggressive style that his father uses and his father trained. And then we have a more gentle, flowing style that his mother trained him in. This Tai Chi kind of feel. And later on, we actually see the mother's sister, the aunt, trains Shang-Chi even more in this same style. So it's a nice dichotomy of this super aggression to this super defensive form of fighting styles. And it really makes for some beautiful cinema when you see them use the two styles together. A big part of this film is this idea of a place called Tallow. And it is kind of a hidden fortress kind of situation where they are guarding a gate to a dark dimension. So we kind of have a little bit of a multiverse, maybe. That's a little unclear as to whether this is really a separate dimension, but that is what is stated, or if it's just a cavern that holds the beast. And we'll get to the beast here in a little bit. So Tallow is this kind of magical, hidden away place that guards the Black Gate. And we see some crazy animals that are really cool. This is one of those areas, once again, where the CGI is a little, it's not consistent. Some of the CGI animals look amazing. A couple of them don't look as amazing. Um, and most of them are from traditional Chinese mythology. So these traditionally Chinese mythological creatures. Now, to me, they look like Pokemon, but no disrespect meant there. I'm not familiar with these creatures, so when I saw them, I was like, Pokemon? That's interesting. But some of them really, really are rendered beautifully. Other ones are rendered well, but they kind of stand out from the rest of the film a little bit. One creature that does stand over and above the rest is Morris. Morris is this thing that does not appear to have a face, and it's kind of a somebody calls it a pig chicken, I believe. It's six legs with wings and no face. I'm not sure what this thing is supposed to be. It is kind of crazy and interesting. It is a little bit of a comic relief. It's a fun little character, and if it's probably not the next Baby Yoda, but it's close. The next Porg, maybe that's the right fit. As I said, I really did enjoy this film, but it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. As I said earlier, some of the CGI is weak. It has lots and lots of standard movie tropes, and this is something that a lot of people have complained about. They feel like the writing is just not original. I get it, but this is just a fun movie. It's not original. It's not dramatic, although there's some drama in it. It's not a blatant comedy, although there's some comedy in it. It's just a fun romp of a movie. But lots of the standard tropes are buried in this film to write the script. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not living up to my potential. A romance between enemies, brother and sister conflict, father-child conflict. Comic relief is there so that there's somebody to explain things to. The bad guy has a last-minute redemption and heroic death. The standard Marvel, oh, here's the bad guy, but wait, there's another bad guy, monster guy that's really pulling the strings. And, that's kind of the twist, but it's not really a twist because it's kind of pointed right out to you in the middle of the film that's what's going on. There's nothing hugely original in the story, but it is put together well and executed well. It feels like a martial arts movie in the Marvel Universe without losing the feel of either. It's a really, really enjoyable film. Well worth the watch. Questions. Here are some questions that I think this movie brings up. Number one, will Shang-Chi and his sister live a long life too? Their father lived 1,000 years. Why did he live 1,000 years? That's a little unclear. Is it because of the rings? Is it because he is something special? If he's something special, did he pass that something special on to his children? We don't know. Hard to tell. Or will Shang-Chi live a long time because he has the rings? Super unclear. Will there be another unknown sibling? I mean, he did live 1,000 years when Wu could have other children, could have a half sibling somewhere out there that we don't know about. Tons and tons of possibilities for Shang-Chi 2. What part will Katie play in the bigger future of the MCU? Super unclear. She does kind of get her own, not superpowers, but she gets her own abilities shown to her, that she is an archer, which is, something. And that, she's more than just somebody who can park a car, but she can, drive really, really well. So, where does that put her in the MCU? Super unclear, but definitely expect to see her in Shang-Chi too. Awkwafina did a great job playing Katie. Um, I think also she could play a Darcy role. I kind of mentioned earlier, she kind of plays the Darcy character. She could show up in other shows as kind of a Darcy character. Somebody who shows up because she has this one thing that she knows about, and that happens to fit that film. I don't know who that would be. I don't know where that would fall, but I think it could happen. It would make sense, and there's not a reason they couldn't do it. We do have 2 post-credit scenes, and they're fairly significant, but let's start with the second one first, because it's a little more straightforward. We see the sister take over the father's crime syndicate. It's what she always wanted. She even said it earlier in the film. That could play out in the next movie or in other MCU films. So the 10 rings will still exist. It's unclear exactly how that's going to fall in line, but she could get mixed up with the power broker or Val or both. So now we have these 3 powerful female characters that are all in control of evil enterprises. Lots of places that could go. I'm kind of hyped for that. Would love to see the power broker and the 10 rings somehow get mixed up together. Or Val bring a team of not so superheroes in to deal with one or the other. That's going to be fun to watch. I really am looking forward to how they fit all that in. So let's go to the first post-credit scene. And this is probably the most important one for Phase 4, although it's super unclear as to what it means. We have Wong showing up, and Wong's starting to show up in a lot of MCU films. So possibly Wong is going to be our new Nick Fury kind of guy, not calling everybody together, but to kind of tie everybody together. You're having a problem. Wong shows up to talk to you about your problem and says, keep an eye out. We'll contact you. Don't contact us. That kind of thing. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I'm kind of expecting him to show up in more of the Phase 4 movies as this kind of bit character, this short-term character. The major thing about this end scene is we see Wong examining the 10 rings and finding some interesting things out. We see Captain Marvel, and we see Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner, not Professor Hulk, but an actual Bruce Banner show up, and in hologram form. But we see them show up examining the 10 rings and having a discussion of what they are and what they aren't. Definitely hinted at that they are alien technology, that they're way older than 1,000 years, and they're not any of the technology that anybody like Captain Marvel is familiar with. So they're not Chitauri, they're not Kree, and they're not Skrull. So what are they? Where are they from? One of the things they say about the rings is they are a beacon. They are calling out to something. What are they calling out to? Completely left unanswered. So what are they calling out to? Options. Galactus could be a possibility. That's, one of those, what are you going to do if you want a big bad? Could it be Galactus? Yes, it could be. Could it be Kang the Conqueror? Because he's a time hopper. Could they be his rings and he lost them in the past? Maybe. One thing that has been proposed and I'm going to butcher this name. They could be Kakar Anatharon. And this is a weird one. So you just have to follow me for a minute. Earlier, I said in the comics, the traditional 10 rings of the Mandarin came from alien technology, a crashed alien spaceship, from this particular group of aliens. What are this group of aliens? They are a race of giant dragons. Yeah, you heard that right. A race of giant dragons. In the film, in the climax, we basically see a giant dragon. So some conjecture says these rings are calling out to Fing Fang Foom, who is one, if the only, I'm not sure, I wasn't able to confirm this, possibly one of the only of this race named that actually shows up in the comics. And okay, Fing Fang Foom did show up in a Marvel production. It was technically produced by Marvel TV before Marvel TV got melded into Marvel Studios. And so Fing Fang Foom shows up just briefly in MODOK. Yeah, I had to say that. Don't watch MODOK. It's not worth it. If you want to know about MODOK, go find one of my past episodes that's titled something like, Is MODOK Any Good? Let's just say I watched it, so you don't have to. But could Fing Fang Foom be the next big bad? Absolutely. It could work. It could make sense. It's alien technology. It could be calling out to him. It fits in with the comics. It definitely looks like it could be pointed that way. I kind of hope not, because I think that's kind of weak. But, whatever. Marvel will do what Marvel's going to do. MCU is going to MCU. Well, that is, kind of it for the film. It definitely is worth watching. If you haven't taken the time to watch it yet, go see it, go watch it. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, don't go in expecting a huge art film. Don't be expecting something spectacular over the top like Endgame. It is just a nice, middle of the road, straightforward, fun Marvel movie. Well, that's all I have for you today. I do want to leave you with two announcements before we go. And number one is, if you're listening to this on the day the episode launches, it is Giving Tuesday. I want to recommend to you, if you're going to give this Giving Tuesday, consider giving to Contagious Disciple Making. You can find out more about them at contagiousdisciplemaking.com. They are a great group of people who help come alongside people just like you and teach a very natural and easy way to minister to people and lead them to Christ and to disciple them. Definitely worth your investment. Definitely consider it. It is contagiousdisciplemaking.com. Now, for the second announcement, I am planning, shortly after January, I am going to do a Christian Nerds Unite Awards. And what I want to do is something similar to the Oscars, but with a lot less prestige. But I want to do a bit of an award show, and I want to get your input. So here's what I'm looking for right now. I'm looking for two things. Number one, I'm looking for some categories. We're definitely going to do, the best film from 2021. Maybe we're going to do the best superhero film from 2021. The best nerdy film from 2021. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to list all these categories, but I want your help on that. What categories should I consider? What things should we give an award for? And then the second thing is, if you give me an idea of a category, give me some nominations. who would you nominate in that category? And if you're not part of our Christian Nerds Unite Facebook group, that is where I'm going to focus most of this information and have you communicate with me. But for right now, you can send the Facebook page or the admins of the Facebook group, send us a message with either a nomination or a category that you think we should put into the awards, or send me an email at ricky@christiannerdsunite.com. Well, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, click all those buttons down there, whatever they are, click the bell. And you can find all of our social links, our online store, and links to our YouTube channel at christiannerdsunite.com. And while you're there, click on the support tab. We would love to have you as a Patreon. But before you go, I do want to leave you with this blessing. May the Father's hand keep you from stumbling. The footprints of Jesus give you confidence to follow. And the fire of the Spirit keep you warm and safe in your walk with God this week. We'll see you next week. Blessings.